The late watch begins inside the raised operating room at March East Junction. The box is a red brick railway building under a slate roof, built for the Great Eastern Railway in 1885 and raised when a new mechanical frame was installed in 1897. 3 sides of the upper level are glazed, so the room is made less like an enclosed office than a place of continuous lookout. Along one side runs the long line of hand-operated levers. Near them stand the instruments and the working record. Above the room, railway time is kept by a clock. Everything here has a practical relation to the line outside. No named signalman is needed to understand the work. A representative worker of this period enters a room already arranged around attention, sequence, and restraint. He does not begin by pulling a lever. He first takes in the state of the place, the clock, the instrument faces, the record, the position of the frame, and the lines beyond the glass. The box gathers tasks that had once been spread among men working nearer the ground. From this raised room, one signalman, or sometimes 2, could observe, communicate, and control part of a much larger railway system. The surviving structure gives the watch a clear, physical shape. The operating floor stands above the locking level. Below, the lower parts of the frame connect with rods and wires that leave the building toward points and signals. Above, the signalman works where he can see. The upper room is reached by an external flight of steps, and a narrow walkway runs around the glazed sides. Those features serve access and maintenance, but the central fact is the elevated view. The building has been shaped around the need to read both machinery and railway at the same time. What follows is a representative late shift grounded in the surviving box and documented British signaling practice of the period. The precise order of local movements is not known, and no special train needs to be invented. The ordinary work is enough. A clock marks common railway time. Instruments connect this room with neighboring boxes. The lever frame answers only within its mechanical locking. The windows keep the junction in sight. Before the first coded message arrives, the room is quiet, but it is not inactive. The watch has already begun. March East Junction stood east of the station, beside a busy stretch of railway with numerous sidings and heavy through goods traffic. The raised operating room was intended to give the signalman a good view along this complicated area. From 3 glazed sides, the lines could be followed as they entered and left the junction. The view mattered because the work could never be reduced to the lever frame alone. A position shown by an instrument and a route prepared by mechanical controls still had to be joined with what could actually be seen outside. The upper windows divide the landscape into long horizontal bands: rail, siding, signal, post, and the receding geometry of the track. There is no need to place a named locomotive in that view. The junction itself provides the working subject. Some lines carry movement through the area, while others serve sidings and connections. The signalman watches for the condition that concerns his section, but he remains aware that the visible rails form part of a wider arrangement extending beyond the reach of the glass. The long Saxby and Farmer duplex frame fills much of the operating room. Its hand-operated levers run the length of the box, giving the worker a physical map of controlled railway functions without turning the room into a simple machine hall. The frame is important because action passes through it. The windows are equally important because action must be checked against the railway outside. The instruments add a third form of knowledge, carrying stated conditions between boxes. The signalman works where these 3 kinds of information meet: view, indication, and mechanical permission. This arrangement makes observation an active duty. Looking out is not a pause between more important tasks. It is one of the tasks. The signalman follows the line, returns to the instrument, checks the clock, and reads the room again. Nothing has to happen quickly merely because the junction is busy. The work depends on keeping several conditions in order until they agree. The raised position, broad glazing, and full-length frame all support that discipline. March East Junction is not presented as a dramatic tower over the railway. It is a carefully placed working room. The discipline is repetitive by design. Read the room, read the railway, and act only when both remain consistent with the communicated state. Railways required a shared standard of time, and signal boxes were equipped with clocks. In a room like this, the clock is not decoration. It gives the watch a common measure that can be understood beyond one building. The signalman can look from the face of the clock to the line, and then to the record without changing the subject of his work. Time, movement, and written entry belong to the same operating order, even when the room passes through a long interval with no visible train. The working record is kept for railway business rather than personal reflection. Later signal box recollections describe booking trains and noting their passage, and those later accounts fit the practical continuity of the occupation. They do not provide a surviving diary for this particular night at March, but they show why a legible entry mattered. A movement that has been received, prepared, observed, and cleared leaves a concise trace in the work. The record helps the next stage of responsibility remain connected with what has already occurred. The instruments stand between the clock and the outward view in a different sense. They carry agreed information from neighboring boxes. A visible indication does not replace observation, and a bell does not command an immediate pull at the frame. The instrument gives the signalman a stated condition to consider. He acknowledges prescribed communication, reads the indication, and joins it with the condition of the line. This combination keeps the room from depending on memory, guesswork, or a single hurried impression. For now, the record is ready, the instrument faces are readable, and the clock continues its measured progress. The signalman moves no lever simply to begin the story. He waits within the work. The junction remains visible through the glazing, and neighboring sections remain connected through the block system. The order of the room makes waiting precise. When the first bell message comes, it will enter a setting already prepared to receive it. Common time, clear instruments, accessible levers, and an attentive view. The railway is divided into block sections so that an interval of space can be maintained between trains. Each signal box holds responsibility for its part of that arrangement, while neighboring boxes hold responsibility for the connected sections beyond. This is why the signalman must know more than what can be seen directly from the windows. The visible rails are only part of the picture. The stated condition of the line beyond his immediate sight arrives through the block instruments and the coded procedure shared with other boxes. Block instruments developed to help signalmen prevent two trains from occupying the same section of track. Period British instruments commonly showed conditions such as line clear, train on line, and train out of section. In a box of this kind, an indication represented a defined railway condition rather than a general warning. The signalman received it as information to be checked, acknowledged, and carried forward through the proper sequence. Interlocking gives the lever frame its own form of discipline. Points and signals are linked so that related controls must stand in compatible positions. Locking can prevent a lever from moving until other levers are placed as required. The frame therefore does not merely transmit the signalman's intention. It limits what can be done, and in what order. This mechanical restraint reduces the chance that conflicting movements can be prepared together, while still requiring the worker to observe, communicate, and judge the state of the railway. Block working and interlocking are connected, but they are not the same task. The block process concerns the stated condition of a section and communication between boxes. Interlocking concerns what the frame will permit within the mechanical arrangement of this room. Observation joins them. The signalman looks outward, receives or sends the proper message, considers the indication, and acts only when the whole arrangement allows the next step. Responsibility is therefore spread across space, communication, machinery, and human attention, rather than resting in one dramatic action. A brief bell message breaks the interval. It is not an atmospheric sound, and not an invitation to guess. It belongs to a prescribed code shared between signal boxes. The signalman turns from the window toward the instrument and receives the message as a defined item of railway work. The sound has meaning because its pattern is agreed. Communication arrives in a form that can be recognized, acknowledged, and placed within an ordered sequence. The message is acknowledged in the proper manner. The signalman considers the indication and then looks again along the visible lines. A section beyond the windows has its stated condition. The nearby railway has its visible condition. He holds both together. The bell has not removed the need for observation, and the view has not removed the need for communication. The room works because neither source of information is treated as complete by itself. Preparation remains quiet. The signalman checks the line, returns to the instrument, and waits for the block process to reach the point at which a movement may be prepared. The long lever frame stands beside him, but its handles do not move merely because a message has sounded. The work lies in recognizing when the required conditions are present. This attention is active even when the room shows little movement. A pause can be a controlled part of the sequence rather than a delay. The first message has now placed a piece of railway business before the box. It has been received and acknowledged. The line remains under observation. The instrument gives the section a stated condition, and the frame waits within its locking. The next action will be mechanical, but it will not be isolated from what has already happened. The signalman preserves the interval between trains by allowing each part of the process to arrive in order: communication, indication, observation, permission, and only then the physical movement of a lever. When the required conditions stand together, the signalman turns to the Saxby and Farmer frame. The hand-operated levers extend along the length of the operating room. Moving one is physical work, but not a display of strength. A hand closes around the handle, pressure is applied, and the lever travels through a controlled arc within the resistance of the mechanism. The action begins inside the room, yet its purpose lies outside. The frame converts an ordered decision into movement, carried toward railway equipment. Below the operating floor is the locking level. There, the lower lever frame forms part of the mechanical arrangement. Rods and wires leave through the wall. Rodding carries movement toward points, while wires carry movement toward signals. The distinction is simple and useful. A lever does not move an abstract symbol. It sends force through a physical connection. The signalman's hand, the frame, the machinery below. Locking makes that chain conditional. Related levers must be in appropriate positions before another lever can be moved. When the required order is not present, the frame resists the attempted action. That resistance is not a fault in the work. It is part of the work. Interlocking links points and signals so their relationship is governed within the mechanism. The signalman proceeds through a system that demands compatible positions instead of allowing any handle to be moved at any time. Once the permitted lever movement is made, attention returns immediately to the windows and instruments. The work does not end at the handle. Mechanical action prepares the route or signal condition under consideration, while the block procedure continues to define the state of the section. The signalman looks outward again. The frame has done what it is allowed to do. Now the prepared movement must be watched. The room settles back into stillness, but the sequence has advanced from message to machinery and from machinery toward the railway outside. March East Junction stood among busy lines, numerous sidings, and heavy through goods traffic. A train movement through the junction can therefore remain unnamed. Its importance lies in the work it requires. The signalman keeps the relevant line in view, checks the prepared condition, and follows the passage through the part of the railway for which the box is responsible. The windows justify the raised form of March East Junction. From the upper room, the signalman can maintain a lookout along the tracks while remaining close to the frame and instruments. He does not abandon one duty to perform another. The movement outside is read together with the indication inside. What was communicated between boxes and prepared through the levers must now be confirmed by observation as the railway changes from one working condition to the next. There is no need to make the passage fast, loud, or dangerous. Ordinary railway movement is enough to show the system at work. The train enters the observed area, continues through the junction, and moves onward beyond the immediate view. During that passage, the signalman's task is continuity. He watches the line, keeps the instrument condition in mind, and waits for the point at which the section can properly be treated as clear. The frame remains ready, but no repeated explanation is required. As the movement leaves the relevant section, the sequence turns back toward communication. A train passing the windows does not clear itself in the record or in the block procedure. The signalman must recognize that the movement has completed the necessary part of its journey and then continue through the prescribed steps. Observation has carried the work from preparation to passage. The next phase will restore the section's stated condition and leave a concise operational trace of what has occurred. After the movement clears the relevant section, the block process continues. The recognized indication is returned to the prescribed exchange between connected boxes. A bell signal is acknowledged, and the instrument is changed as the sequence requires. The section's condition must be stated for the railway work that follows. The signalman does not treat the passage as self-explanatory. He completes the communication that tells the neighboring box how the section now stands. A brief operational entry may be made where the work calls for it. Later occupational accounts describe booking trains and noting their passage, showing the practical place of written records in signal box work. Here, the entry remains concise and functional. It connects the movement just handled with the continuing responsibility of the watch. The signalman is not writing a narrative. He is keeping railway business clear enough to be used, checked, and carried forward. The frame is restored as the completed process requires, without an invented local locking table or numbered lever routine. Handles return only within the permitted order of the mechanism. The signalman then looks again to the line and the instruments. The section has passed through preparation, movement, and clearance. Its changing state has been handled by communication, observation, and mechanical control. Nothing in the room needs to announce that the sequence is finished. The working order itself shows it. The first movement is complete because information and machinery have both been returned to readiness. The signalman has received coded communication, considered the section, used the frame within its locking, observed the passage, and brought the record forward where appropriate. The railway has not stopped. It has moved from one stated condition to another. In the interval after clearance, the same clock, windows, instruments, and levers remain present. But their relationship has been reset for whatever properly established requirement comes next. The room becomes quiet again, but the watch does not become empty. The signalman returns to the broad outward view and lets the instruments remain within easy sight. The clock continues to measure common railway time. The record holds the completed movement in its proper place. The frame stands accessible along the operating floor. Each object has returned to a condition in which it can support the next sequence without confusion. Waiting is part of the railway process because a section cannot be treated according to desire or impatience. Its condition must be known. Communication must be received and acknowledged. The line must be observed. The frame must permit the required action. During the interval, the signalman maintains these conditions rather than searching for activity. His work is to remain ready without turning readiness into unnecessary movement. A well-kept interval protects the same order as a correctly moved lever, because both prevent the worker from acting before the railway is ready. The junction outside continues beyond the limits of the box. Neighboring signalmen hold their own sections, and the instruments provide the connection between those separate responsibilities. The worker at march does not see the whole railway. He does not need to. He needs a clear view of the relevant local lines, reliable communication about the connected sections, and a disciplined mechanical arrangement for the points and signals under his control. This quiet portion of the shift gives the room its steady rhythm. The signalman looks out, glances toward the clock, checks the instrument, and returns to the view. None of these actions needs emphasis. Together they keep the watch continuous. The absence of a bell for a time is not a break in responsibility. It is simply a period in which the system holds its present state, and the signalman keeps that state available to be read. Order in the signal box supports ordinary work. The windows must remain useful for observation, instrument faces readable, the record legible, and the space beside the frame clear enough for controlled movement. These are not separate domestic concerns added to railway duty. They are practical conditions of a working room. At March, the raised operating level, 3 glazed sides, and full-length mechanical frame make visibility and access especially important. A walkway around the glazed upper level was associated with the care of the windows, and later, signal box workers remembered cleaning glass, washing floors, and polishing lever handles. These memories belong to a later period, but they reveal a durable occupational concern. A room built around seeing, reading, and handling machinery had to remain usable. Clear glass, unobstructed movement, and recognizable surfaces supported the work directly. The record lies where it can be used without interrupting the sequence. The instruments must be read as instruments rather than decoration, and the levers must remain accessible when controlled action is required. The signalman can move along the frame, look outward, and return to the written entry without searching through a crowded room. Plain order reduces unnecessary effort. It keeps attention on the railway instead of on misplaced objects or obstructed space. Nothing about this order requires ceremony. It is the ordinary condition in which a signalman can see clearly, read clearly, and act clearly. During the interval, he notices the usefulness of the room as part of the watch itself. When the next message arrives, the process can begin without confusion. The bell will be heard, the indication read, the line observed, and the frame approached in the same controlled environment that supported the earlier movement. Another coded message arrives. This time the actions are familiar, and the narration can remain shorter because the system has already been understood. The signalman receives the bell signal, acknowledges it within the prescribed exchange, and considers the instrument indication with the railway beyond the windows. He does not need to rediscover the purpose of the block section. He returns to a working sequence that has remained present throughout the quiet interval. The line is observed before the frame is used. When the communicated and visible conditions permit action, the signalman moves along the levers and makes the required mechanical change within the locking. Rods and wires carry the effect outward, but their arrangement does not need to be explained again. They now function as familiar parts of the room. The signalman's attention passes smoothly from instrument to view, from view to frame and back toward the line. A second unnamed movement follows through the junction area. It carries no special status in the shift and needs no dramatic emphasis. It is another ordinary piece of railway business. The signalman watches what has been prepared, keeps the section's condition in mind, and waits for the movement to clear the relevant part of the line. The busy character of March East Junction appears through repetition of responsibility, rather than through spectacle. After clearance, the required communication is returned. The instrument is restored through the proper process. The frame is brought back as the completed movement requires, and the record is advanced where appropriate. The second sequence matters because it shows continuity. The same principles support a different movement without needing a new technical lesson. The box remains connected to neighboring sections, and the signalman remains responsible for keeping communication, observation, machinery, and record in agreement. The later part of the watch settles into the same measured order with which it began. The clock continues to mark railway time. The record contains the movements that have been handled. The instruments remain ready to state the condition of connected sections, and the long lever frame stands within its mechanical locking. Outside, the junction continues as a working railway rather than a scene waiting for a final event. Responsibility passes forward through clear information rather than ceremony. The record must remain legible. The instrument indications must correspond with the actual working condition. The frame must stand as the completed sequence requires. Whether another worker enters later, or the same signalman continues for a time, the duty is carried by this maintained order and by the accurate relation between room, railway, and record. The box itself expresses that continuity. The operating room is raised for observation. The glazing keeps the lines in view. The instruments connect one section with another. The levers transmit controlled force to points and signals, while the locking limits incompatible action. The clock and record keep the work joined to common time and written sequence. No single object runs the railway. The system depends on their agreement and on the worker who keeps reading that agreement. The work remains calm because each part carries only the responsibility assigned to it. March East Junction therefore ends the episode with the railway still active and responsibility continuing. The signalman looks from the room to the line and back again. A section is clear or occupied according to the established process. A message may arrive when the railway requires it. The next movement will be prepared only when communication, observation, and mechanism permit. The watch continues in the calm discipline of ordinary work.